Good morning, everyone. We're happy to welcome you to SPG's 2024 Pulse Variety Seminar. My name is Lynn Phelps, and I'm the Director of Research and Development for SPG and your host for today's session. For those in attendance today, if you provided either a CCA or a CCSC number at the time of your registration, you will receive credits for today's sessions. After this event concludes, a recording will be available on our website, so be sure to watch for an email from us on how to access that recording. At the end of the presentations, there will be a live question and answer discussion. So if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A window, and you can do so at any time. SPG is guided by the grower-elected board of directors, driven to create opportunities for profitable growth for Saskatchewan pulses. Two of SPG's 5 key result areas relate to research, development, and extension to increase the yields of established pulse crops such as peas and lentils, and promote the adoption of smaller acre pulse crops such as chickpeas, soybeans, faba beans, dry beans, and newer pulses. Today's sessions focus on topics that support these key result areas. Before we start with our presenters, SPG has a new video which provides an update on the pulse breeding landscape. Now we are going to start with a presentation on upcoming pulse varieties. And we've had a change in presenters, so Meagen Reed and Mike Brown, who are agronomy managers with SPG, will be giving the presentation. Mike is focused on providing lentil, chickpea, and dry bean information and leading related agronomy program initiatives. Meagen provides education and guidance on peas, faba beans, soybeans, and fenugreek. I will now turn it over to Mike and Meagen for their update on varieties.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. Just bear with me a second. Get this into presenter mode. Sorry, just a second. I apologize. Can everyone see my screen okay?
That looks great, Meagen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as Lynn said, my name is Meagen Reed, and I am one of the agronomy managers here with Sask Pulse Growers. And today I will be talking about pea and faba bean varieties that are new and upcoming for this year. So starting with peas, we'll talk about current, emerging, and upcoming varieties, as well as looking at some of the acreage trends and what happened here in 2023. So to begin, we're looking at trends in pea acres, so specifically yellow peas. And what we can see here in this graph on the right-hand side is the trend in acres over the last 8 years, so from 2016 to 2023. And this graph shows that over 80% of yellow pea acres were planted to 6 leading varieties. CDC Meadow, which is represented in that dark blue bar, and it trends down towards 2023, is still remaining the dominant variety despite having lower yield potential. This may be due because of the earliness. Some growers like the good seed integrity of this variety. However, we do have newer varieties that have hit the market that have more to offer. As acres of CDC Meadow are steadily decreasing, but slightly increased in 2022 and 2023. So we saw that little tail there on the right side of the graph coming up. Other varieties are gaining in acres though, and they include CDC Inca, CDC Spectrum, and AAC Carver. Another newer variety, CDC Chrome, which was released in 2018, I believe. I may have gotten that wrong. We'll get into it later on. However, CDC Chrome is emerging and gaining acres as seed becomes more available and overtook our check of CDC Amarillo. New and emerging and upcoming yellow pea varieties that have been released over the last 4 years and are hitting the market now include AAC Aberdeen, AAC Chrome, and AAC Profit, all released in 2019. AAC Beyond, CDC Hickey, and AAC Julius were released and CDC Tollefson, pardon me, were all released in 2021. And newly released in 2022 was CDC Citrine. And all of these varieties offer greater yield potential and are very exciting for us. When looking at the long-term data, so this is data analysis over a number of years, this graph is showing the ranking by performance. So on the left-hand side, we have variety, and these bars indicate the yield performance. And this is a compilation of 10 plus years of data. And so when we look at the top ranking varieties, we're seeing our newly released varieties, AAC Chrome, CDC Tollefson, CDC Citrine, and CDC Hickey. The most dominant variety in the marketplace, however, is still CDC Meadow. And we can see where Meadow ranks. It's 5th from the bottom as far as performance. And so our new varieties that have hit the market recently have a lot to offer as far as yield performance. AAC Beyond, AAC Aberdeen, and AAC Julius were not included in this ranking, as 2023 was the first year that these varieties were in the trials. And we'll look at the variety data here next. So there's a lot going on in this slide, but what I want to highlight is specifically when we look at this 2023 trial data, so these are the yield results from this past summer, we see that our newly released varieties are doing quite well. And so when we look at the red bars, Aberdeen, Beyond, and Julius. So Aberdeen was our highest yielding variety in this year's trials. AAC Beyond and AAC Julius towards the end of the pack, but there's not any significant difference between these yields. You can see that the bars are very similar as far as where they land at 50 plus bushels per acre. When we look at some of the other new varieties that are out, CDC Hickey, CDC Citrine, and CDC Tollefson, also performing very, very well. And so Citrine and Tollefson are 4th and 5th from the top performers this past year. And for comparison's sake, CDC Spectrum is also a well-known variety and highly adopted. Spectrum is following middle of the pack. So digging into these new and emerging yellow pea varieties, specifically going to talk here now on the ones that were released recently. So AAC Aberdeen was released in 2019, developed by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and is marketed by Alliance Seeds. It is particularly high yielding in the south, where it yielded 108% of Czech, and the Czech is Amarillo, and 107% in the north. It has slightly lower protein by 1.1% versus Amarillo, but really good standability. And good seed coat breakage and dimpling are rated fair for this variety. A little bit larger seed at 250 grams per 1,000 kernel weight, and certified seed is currently available. Looking at AAC Profit, this variety was also released in 2019, yielded 103% of Czech in the south, and did very, very well in 2023, coming in at 109% in the north. This variety also has higher protein, coming in at 0.8% higher than our Czech of Amarillo, Again, seed coat breakage is rated fair, slightly smaller seed size, so fairly average at 230 grams, and certified seed is also available. This variety, AAC Profit, is marketed by FP Genetics. Moving on to AAC Beyond, so and AAC Julius, these two varieties were released in 2021. So AAC Beyond is released by Cantera Seeds, and AAC Julius is marketed by FP Genetics. So Beyond yields very, very well, very consistent across both geographies, coming in at 107% in the south and 108% in the north versus Czech. It's early maturing and is slightly higher protein percentage compared to Amarillo. Again, seed coat breakage and dimpling are both rated fair, slightly smaller seed size at 220 grams, and certified seed for this variety will be available in 2025. Similarly, AAC Julius, so this variety actually yielded really, really well in the south, so 110% of Czech and 105% of Czech in the north. Again, another early maturing variety, almost half a point better in protein set than Amarillo, good seed characteristics. And the one thing that we want to point out about AAC Julius is that the standout for this variety is that it is rated moderately resistant to fusarium root rot. So that's a really big bonus to this variety. Smaller seed size, 210 grams. And again, certified seed will be available in 2025. Additionally, we have CDC Hickey and CDC Tollefson, also released in 2021. So both of these varieties were developed by the CDC and released by SAS Pulse growers. Both varieties are high yielding in both the north and south geographies, and this suggests that we have good standability and adaptation across multiple environments. And you'll see that that's common amongst these newer varieties that we're presenting today. Both of these varieties are also rated moderately resistant for fusarium root rot, so building in that disease resistance into these newer genetics. Both are rated good as far as seed characteristics are concerned. CDC Hickey has good protein percent at half a point higher than Amarillo, whereas Tollefson actually in 2022 was rated at 0.3% higher in protein for Amarillo, but in 2023 was 0.3% below Amarillo. So there's a 0.6% swing 1 year to the next, which is interesting and could be a function of the environmental impacts we saw this year, which I think Sherilyn may get into later today. Seed for CDC Hickey is currently available, so that variety is available to growers. CDC Tollefson certified seed is expected to be available in 2025. And last, for our yellow peas, we're looking at CDC Citrine. So this variety was released in 2022, again developed by the CDC and released by SAS Pulse growers. It is high yielding at 108% in the south and 110% in the north, so really, really good variety. This variety has good standability and great seed characteristics, 0.3% higher protein than Amarillo, and again is rated MR for fusarium root rot and has slightly improved resistance to Mycosphaerella blight. Average seed size of 220 grams, and we're expecting seed to be available in 2025. Moving to green peas, so we'll take a step back and look at the trends in acres on green peas. So when we look at acres here in 2023, 6 pea varieties competed for 98% of the green pea acres. And when we look at this graph on the right, a large proportion of those acres are going into CDC forests. So this is one of our newer varieties. The rest of the acres were split fairly equally between CDC Greenwater, CDC Limerick, CDC Razor, and CDC Spruce, with that older variety of CDC Striker declining in acreage percent, which is a good thing. We've seen that green pea varieties have slowly decreased in the last, or acres, sorry, of Limerick, Greenwater, and Razor have slowly decreased in the last 2 to 3 years in favor of forest. So forest has been gaining in acreage percentage over the last 2 to 3 years here. And those trends longer term, so looking back to 2016, Striker was released in 2002. So it's been on the market for quite a while and has steadily declined in favor of newer varieties. So we are seeing more significant trends down in those older genetics compared to some of our yellow pea genetics. And those higher yielding varieties are taking up that difference. And so if we want to see CDC forest is that lime green bar, You could see it was released, hit the market in 2019, increased to 2020, is starting to tail, but is still dominating those acres. Again, when we look at pea yield ranking by performance, so our top 4 varieties are newer genetics that have been released in the last few years, looking at CDC Husky, CDC Forest, CDC Rider, and CDC Spruce. And those older genetics, Striker and Razor, are ranked 2nd and 3rd from the bottom as far as performance over the long-term data. So this is, we're leaving a lot of yield potential, pardon me, available by adopting some of these newer varieties, which we are seeing that shift at the grower level, which is nice to see, particularly with the adoption of CDC Forest. When we dig into the 2023 green pea trial data, so this is just from last year in our regional variety trials, looking at our green pea acres, we can see Husky here on the right, CDC Forest in this pink, CDC Spruce in the purple, and CDC Rider in the blue, and relatively similar yield performance this past year, with Forest having a slightly higher edge. The mean bar here, that black line in the middle, is the average yield across all of our trial sites this past year, and you can see it was performing slightly better than the rest of the varieties, with CDC Husky close behind. So really good performing varieties we have, and we can see why CDC Forest is so popular with that higher yielding. So digging specifically into that variety, since I've talked so much about it already, CDC Forest was released by SAS Pulse growers to SSG in 2017, and commercial production began in 2020. In 8 years of the regional variety trial testing, which is 83 site years of data, it's a lot of data, CDC Forest is ranked 2nd overall and is currently the highest yielding green pea available to growers in the marketplace. It has demonstrated consistent high yields over multiple sites and environmental conditions, indicating it has good yield stability, environmental adaptability, and is a good choice for growers to try if they're interested in trying a new green pea genetics. This past year, we saw 102% of check in the south and 103% in the north as far as yield goes, and the check is that yellow pea variety CDC Amarillo. This variety is also rated good for seed coat breakage and dimpling, but only fair for bleaching. So that might be the only watch out with Forest, is that it is only fair for bleaching. Certified seed is currently available to growers today. Looking at an upcoming variety, CDC Rider. So this variety was released to select growers in 2022, and certified seed won't be available for a few years. However, in the last 4 years of RVT testing, so our regional variety trial testing, CDC Rider ranked 3rd overall, just behind CDC Forest. So still a really good high yielding variety, as we saw in that long-term data graph that I presented earlier, and yields very similar to Forest in the south. So 101% of yield in the south this past year and 99% of check yield in the north. This variety has excellent standability and improved disease resistance compared to Forest. So CDC Rider is rated MR for fusarium root rot, which is a great benefit. And we're looking at good rating for seed coat breakage, dimpling, and a good rating for bleaching. So also improved bleaching rating with this variety. We're expecting certified seed to be available in the next couple of years. And last but not least, a very exciting variety, which if you remember our yield ranking chart, this was topping the chart. So CDC Husky, this is the highest yielding green pea variety currently on in development. It yielded 110% in the south and 108% of check in the north. So that is significantly higher than the other varieties we're seeing. This is 6 to 7% higher than CDC Forest. So Forest is an excellent yielding variety. CDC Husky is pushing the bar even higher. It has good standability, similar to CDC Greenwater, which is slightly better than CDC Forest for standability. And again, improved disease resistance, as it is also rated MR for fusarium root rot. Good seed characteristics, so we have resistance to bleaching, seed coat breakage, and dimpling, and we're expecting certified seed in the next couple of years. And now I will pass it over to Lentils, and I will give Mike. Mike will be able to present now. There we go.
Awesome. Meagen. So yeah, now we'll move on to the lentils here. and we had 6 small red lentil varieties from 2016 to 2023 shown here on the graph. Over 50% of our small red lentil acres were planted to the 3 leading varieties, Maxim, Impulse, and Proclaim. When we look at this number last year, we were about 85%. So we're starting to get some more share of the market class with some of the other emerging varieties taking some acres here. CDC Maxim still remains the dominant variety despite its lower yield potential. However, the acres, as we can see, they are steadily starting to decrease in favor of Impulse and Proclaim. Both Impulse and Proclaim were released in 2014, and both represent about a 6 to 9% yield advantage versus Maxim in the south and 3 to 4% in the north. Impulse is also our highest yielding Clearfield variety and does have the largest seed currently as well too, at 44 grams per 1,000 kernel weight. Next highest would be Proclaim and Maxim at 40 grams. CDC Red Moon continues to be our highest yielding conventional small red. Yields 113% of Maxim in the south, 107% in the north. Released in 2015, and the uptake's been a little bit slower just due to the lack of IMI tolerance. However, growers are starting to see the yield advantage of this variety starting to offset the lack of herbicide tolerance, especially as we start to see a few more residual herbicide options starting to be offered for lentils now. We did see a decrease in acres in 2023 in Red Moon back to about 2020, 2021 levels. Simi and Nimble are a couple of emerging varieties as well too. So those were both released in 2019, and we're starting to see acres starting to trend up there and compete with Impulse, Proclaim, and Maxim as well. So our long-term statistical analysis of our RVT data, we can see the ranking yield of the small reds. Our top 3 varieties we're going to be conventional. So Red Moon stands alone there at the top. And then you can see in the blue box, the next following 3 are Impulse, Proclaim, and Nimble. So they're pretty close, but Red Moon, just because it doesn't have that yield drag due to the Clearfield trait being bred in, it is our standalone highest yielding red lentil. CDC Simi, a little bit below CDC Maxim on the mean there. So you can see Maxim in that green box with the kind of tan colored bar. And then on the left, Nimble in the blue box with that blue colored bar. Nimble does, or Simi on the left there. So Simi does have a similar yield potential. If you look at the 50% data there, quite similar to Nimble on yield potential. So a couple of emerging small red lentil varieties we have that we'll talk about that we just showed some info on. CDC Nimble. So I like to think Nimbles for the north. It's the highest yielding small red lentil in the north. We do have high yield in the south as well too. So it comes in 1% under CDC Impulse as the highest yielding Clearfield variety in the south. 1% or 1 centimeter taller than Maxim and a slightly smaller seed size, so 38 grams versus the 40 grams. CDC Simi performs particularly well in the south there, yields 107% versus CDC Maxim. Most of the other traits of Simi are going to be quite comparable to Maxim. Seed size and thickness are slightly less than Maxim though. Both these varieties currently have certified seed available as well. So in 2023, we did a small red lentil variety showcase out at Rosetown. So this was our field scale showcase site. We did randomized strip trials, triple replicated. You can see on the graph on the right, the error bars are going to represent our highest and our lowest yields of those varieties. The green bar is just the mean average of our yield. Our broken record here, our Red Moon was our standout highest yielding again due to that ability to not have the drag of the Clearfield trait being bred in. All these pictures were taken on August 2nd. all of our small reds, so if you go into our seed guides, all our small reds are going to be rated E to M for maturity. So it's putting it about 100 to 103 days on days to maturity. When we noticed in this trial, and you can see from some of those plants that were sampled, that the impulses did seem to have a few days later for maturity, even though they are still rated an E to an M. So something to keep in mind on that. Now into one of our upcoming large red lentils. So this one is CDC Monarch. So if you were on this presentation last year, it was called IBC 1306. So this is an upcoming Clearfield large red lentil variety released in 2023. Currently, it's in foundation seed production. We should have certified seed expected in about 25 or 26, so the next couple of years. Yields 120% of maximum in the south and 119% in the north. So our CDC KR2s are our current large red lentil variety we have. This represents a yield increase over CDC KR2 by 16 to 29%. TKW for this variety is 51 grams. Comparing that to KR2s, they're 55 grams. Has a thicker seed coat and a bit earlier maturity than the KR2s. Both are the same height, which is 3 centimeters taller than the Maxims. SPG also released a large red lentil CDC Sublime in 2020 through a closed loop non-exclusive sublicense. Sublime was unique that it was a large red lentil with a green seed coat. So they went with a closed loop production system to make sure no admixture of this type was in with any of the large green lentils. Monarch, on the other hand, we have the correct seed coat with this variety, which is gray for the red lentils. So the decision was made to go ahead with a broad release to select seed growers. So here you can see the yield performance in 3 years of head-to-head RVT testing. So we have 14 site years in the brown and dark brown, and then 5 site years in the black and gray. And you can see that that Monarch did yield quite well head-to-head against our small reds and then our other large reds as well too. Now moving into our trends with the large green lentils. So large green lentil market class, we have 4 varieties competing for about 85% of our acres. Green Star is still our dominant variety, has been since 2019, despite not having that Clearfield herbicide tolerance trait. We saw acres dip slightly in 2022 compared to 20 and 21, but they did increase again in 2023. Acres of Greenland and Empower have been trending downwards since 2018, and we do see Lima aggressively expanding over the past 4 years. So 2024, we'll expect the Lima to be putting some pressure on Green Star for the crown for large green lentil acres. Looking at our yield ranking of some of our large green lentil varieties, so CDC Green Star ranking at the top in a statistical analysis of 4 years of the RVT data. Again, not surprising as it is a conventional lentil. Clearfield varieties of CDC Lima and CDC Grim closely ranked 2nd and 3rd as well too, and still showing that they are competing with Green Star for a pretty high yield. Now to discuss a little bit about some of these emerging large greens. So CDC Lima, released in 2018, yields 93% in the south of the small red lentil Czech Maxim and 92% in the north. This makes it the highest yielding large green in the north by 6%, with Green Star coming in at 86% of Maxim. A little bit shorter than the other large greens, has a large seed size at 74 grams compared to the older varieties, Empower and Green Star, both at 64 grams. We do have certified seed available for this variety as well too. Now on to CDC Grim. So Grim is a good yielding large green lentil with improved disease resistance. This is the only green rated moderately resistant to anthracnose race 1. The rest of the large greens are going to be either rated susceptible, except for Green Star, which is rated intermediate. Has the largest seed in the market class with 1,000 kernel weight, 1 gram larger than Lima, 75 grams. Yields 94% in the south and 84% in the north of Maxim, so it is the highest yielding Clearfield large green in the south. and certified seed is available for this variety as well too. Now into our small green lentils. So we have 3 varieties competing for over 90% of our acres in Saskatchewan. CDC Invincible has been the dominant variety for the past 8 years here. Viceroy has remained relatively flat in acres over the past 8 years, and then Kermit has slowly been creeping up over the last 4 years. On our 4-year RVT yield data, or 5 years of RVT yield data, we show how Invincible and Kermit are stacking up to one of our newer varieties that is coming out, our CDC Jiminy. And here we can see CDC Jiminy. So this is an IMI-tolerant small green lentil variety with great yield, currently in registered seed production, and we're expecting certified seed in 2025. Overall, it's the highest yielding small green lentil in both the north and south zones, and is well adapted to the brown and dark brown soil zones, where it yields 108% of maximum. 2% yield advantage over its non-IMI-tolerant counterpart CDC Kermit in both the north and the south, and 14 to 18% over Invincible, which is the dominant variety in acres for this market class. Same height as Kermit, slightly taller than Invincible in maximum, and has the largest seed at 38 grams versus 34 for either Kermit or Invincible. So now we'll move into some of the chickpea data here. So we have several new high-yielding Kabuli varieties. They're all tolerant to solo ADV herbicide. CDC Lancer, so we really want to push that. CDC Lancer is the new check. So the Amits or the B90s that used to be the check are now being replaced with Lancer. So keep that in mind when we start referencing any of the yield comparisons on these chickpea varieties. The 3 that are going to be talked about today: Lancer, Orkney, and Pearl, and we'll also talk a bit about Pasqua as well. So CDC Lancer, released in 2019. I'll give a kind of an update on how it stacked up against Amit before. Now it's the check. So it used to yield 112% in the brown soil zone and 105% in the dark. Now it is the 100% check yield against everything. It is the highest yielding chickpea in the brown soil zone. We have improved resistance to Ascochyta blight with it, tied with Amit and Pearl for first in class with a rating of 4.4 on a 0 to 9 scale, where 0s being our best rating and 9 would be our worst. We have a seed size of 353 grams, so that kind of puts it right around the middle of the pack for the Kabuli seed size, and certified seed is available. Next, we have CDC Orkney. So this was released by SPG in 2020, yields 99% of Lancer in the brown soil zone, which puts it at standalone second in yield, and 103% in the dark brown soil zone, where it's tied with CDC Frontier as the highest yielding variety. In 8 years of RVT data, statistical analysis ranked it first for yield overall. Has a seed size of 359 grams, which again puts it in that middle of the pack with Lancer, and we do have certified seed available. CDC Pearl was released to select seed growers in 2021. Yields similar to Orkney in both the brown and the dark brown soil zones, 98% of Lancer in the brown and 103% in the dark brown. This variety also has improved resistance to Ascochyta, where I mentioned previously. It's tied for first with Amit and Lancer at 4.4. This variety also showed less yield drop in trials where we had no fungicide applied versus other Kabuli varieties. This one is the second smallest in seed size in the Kabuli class, with a TKW of 291, with the Amits being the smallest. On a round hole seed, we had just over half size out at 7 mils and about a quarter size out at 6 mil. And we do have certified seed available for this variety as well too. CDC Pasqua was released in 2021. Although it's a lower yielding variety than the other Kabulis, It boasts one of the largest seed sizes. So under good conditions, there is potential to get seed size reaching into that 10 mil range. A seed lot that was tested with 398 gram 1,000 kernel weight, sized out at 89% 8 mil and over, 39% 9 mil and over, and then 3.7% fell into that 10 mil category. And we do have certified seed available for this variety this year as well. So here we can compare some of the seed sizes with the varieties available in chickpeas. So the one column, we can see the TKW that was tested and what the seed size was retained by the sieve and round hole. There's also the TKW in that column where you can compare the tested size versus the actual expected TKW of the variety from the Sask seed guide. So Orkney and Pasqua are up on the larger size there. Orions do have the largest seed size, but they are our lowest yielding variety in both the brown and dark brown soil zone and have the worst rating for Ascochyta. A couple of new chickpea varieties being released in 2024. We have candidate 2335-23. This has the best yield and good disease rating, but the disadvantage of smaller seed size. Candidate 2307-15 has a larger seed size, but not as higher yielding. 2307-15 yield similar to Lancer, seed size slightly larger than Lancer and Orkney, matures 3 days later than Lancer, 2 days later than Leader, and a better disease rating for Ascochyta versus Lancer or Orkney. 2335-23 yields 4% higher compared to Lancer in the dark brown, seed size smaller than Lancer or Orkney, matures 3 days later than Lancer, 2 days later than Leader, same as 2307-15, and has the best rating for Ascochyta blade. Seed supply of both lines is low, as there's only 36 bags of 2307-15 and 35 bags of 2335-23. A note on this too, so the images we can see of the seed available there, dry year smaller than normal, about 15% smaller than would be expected. An emerging Desi chickpea we have now, CDC Sunset. It was released in 2021. Early maturing by about 2 days versus CDC Console. Yield is good at 93% in the brown and 98% in the dark brown versus Lancer, and out yields Console by 3% in the dark brown. We currently have 6 bags available of this variety. And next we have CDC Kala. So this is our Black Desi chickpea released in 2021. This variety also has improved resistance to Ascochyta compared to Kabuli's. Same rating as Sunset. It's also earlier maturing at 2 days earlier than Console, which is also the same as Sunset. We're currently in registered seed production stage with this variety and certified seeds expected in 2025. We also still have 5 bags of seed available with this variety too. And with that, we will swing it back to Meagen, and she can present on some of the new faba bean varieties.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be discussing some new varieties in faba bean. It says low vicine, con vicine I'll also be discussing, but just I'll give a brief overview as Lynnell Pomedli will be discussing that in more detail here. So vicine, con vicine. So what is this? So vicine and con vicine is an anti-nutritional factor that is has been traditionally part of the genetic makeup of our older varieties of faba bean. So the old Snowdrop and Snowbird had what we call vicine, or were high vicine varieties. And this anti-nutritional factor causes favism or anemia in a small percentage of the human population, which this factor is why we have had limited adoption or impact into being able to access the human consumption market with faba bean and faba bean protein. It can also be a concern for animal and poultry feed. And so our older genetics with this high vicine content has been the limiting factor. And we'll see now, as with the varieties that I'm going to present on today, a shift from Visine varieties to low Visine or con-Visine varieties, where that anti-nutritional factor is not part of the genetic makeup. So as I just said, the industry is switching to all new low Visine or con-Visine varieties, pardon me. So we are looking at breeding for low Visine, con-Visine. So it was a single gene that was identified in France, and in a variety that is now our standard Czech, known as Navi. That might be familiar to some of you. And the crosses were conducted with this new genetic trait to look at yield potential, breeding in small seed size, incorporating food quality, so looking at the end-use production systems for Faba bean, and also focusing on agronomic performance. And the reason we did this again, because there's a huge market opportunity for Faba bean and Faba protein. So we can expand our marketing opportunities into the food market, so ingredient markets. Faba bean as a plant-based protein, the seed content is really high, so 24 to 35% seed protein content within the seed. Faba protein also offers a healthy amino acid profile and has a good flavor profile, which has been challenging with some other plant-based protein products like pea flour or pea protein. So Faba bean doesn't pose those challenges as far as the fractionating and using the ingredients. Other benefits to growing Faba bean, as many of you know, is Faba has the highest rate of nitrogen fixation or biological fixation, so they can fix up to 88% of their nitrogen requirements from the atmosphere, and they are also resistant or tolerant to Aphanomyces as a crop. So when we look at root rot and keeping a pulse in rotation, that's also a benefit for our Fabas. As far as varieties go, so looking at some of the varieties that we have that are LVC varieties. So when I say LVC, that means low Visine, con Visine. Navi, produced by KGB Meyer Farms, is now our standard Czech for the white flowered Faba. There's also DL Novato, CDC 1142, which was released by SPG in 2022, and CDC 1089, which we released in 2023. And the variety that I really want to focus on today is CDC 1310, which will be new here for 2024. All of these varieties are closed loop production in Saskatchewan, so that's part of this trait stewardship initiative due to the LVC traits that are built into these varieties. So looking at CDC 1310, so this is a high yielding variety, yielded 107% of snowbird the last 2 years of registration trials, so very good performing compared to our old Czech. It also has small seed size, so that has also been a challenge for some growers to adopt Faba bean into their rotation, is just the logistics of seeding. So we have 352 grams per 1,000 kernel weight with CDC 1310 compared to the 480, which was pretty standard for snowbird. It's also maturing a couple days earlier. The protein is slightly higher than snowbird. It's similar height to snowbird, and we currently do have some limited seed available. And you can see on the table on the right here, we have the variety and the mean performance. So CDC 1310 is coming in at 97% of yield of Navi, as you can see there, which Navi again is the new Czech. Snowbird used to be the Czech. And when we look at comparison of varieties, so when we look at this table, we're seeing number of years tested, the percent yield of Navi, because that's the Czech, days to maturity, height, lodging, seed weight. The highest for yield is CDC 1089. All of the varieties are good contenders, but we do have to have a winner, and CDC 1089 would be it. As far as height, CDC 1142 is slightly shorter. The best lodging rating is DL Novato, and maturity rating, CDC varieties tend to mature earlier from what we've been seeing. And if seed size is a concern, CDC 1142 and 1310 have the smallest seed size. So that CDC 1310, we have closed loop license released here in 2024. If you want to find any information on all of these varieties that Mike and I presented on here today, we do have the Pulse Variety Performance Portal, so our regional variety trial portal. To find it, you would go to our website, saspulse.com, go down to the regional trial variety portal and click on the link. That will take you to this screen here, number 2, and you can put in your location within the province, and it will direct you to that city or that area of the province. And then you can select the crops that you're interested in, and you will get a map that will pop up. You can click on those yellow dots, And you can see which varieties were tested in your area to get up-to-date, accurate, and robust yield information, performance information on varieties that are being grown in your area. You can also then compare varieties as well within this portal. So you compare up to 5 varieties within crop and do head-to-heads at up to 3 locations to see how they competed year over year. So that's just a plug for our variety performance portal. It's very useful and it's easy to use yourself to see what kind of varieties are performing in your growing region. And I think that's all we have time for today. So I would like to say thank you. I can pass this over to Sherry Lynn if you wanted to wrap up, Sherry Lynn.
Sure. A big thank you to you and Mike for the presentation. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the Teams and we will address them in the question and answer discussion at the end of this webinar. We are pleased now to be joined by Lynnell Pomedli, who is the lead inspector and owner of Caliber Seed Services. Lynnell provides over 10 years of knowledge as a seed crop inspector, seed grower, and seed retailer, specializing in pulses, cereals, oilseeds, and forages. Welcome, Lynnell.
Thanks, Sherry Lynn. All right. All right. Thanks, SPG, for inviting me to speak today. As my role in the in the pulse world is I've been a seed grower and a seed inspector, and just last week, Canadian Seed Growers Association sent me a certificate for 15 years of growing pedigreed seed. And when I thought about it a little bit more, actually, the year before that, I started as a seed inspector with CFIA. So,
Lynnell, sorry to interrupt. We cannot see your presentation. We just see your meeting screen on your web browser for Teams.
Okay. How's that?
That's better now if you just start. Perfect. That's much better. Thank you so much.
Good, good. And so, yeah, in the Northeast, we, in 2013 is when CFIA then started to hand off seed inspections to private industry. So that's why I started Caliber Seed Services. I had experience with it, and right out of the gate in 2013, our farm grew Faba beans, and the other seed growers started growing Faba beans, and we were in the hot spot. We were in the northeast corner, lots of water, lots, great area for Faba beans to growing, and great nitrogen fixation, as pulse is kind of with his hit and miss for that. So that's kind of where Faba beans started. So I'm going to start talking to you about Faba bean seed production and the importance of low Visine, convisine, and kind of give you a snapshot of varieties that the seed inspection side has seen growing in the past and what was growing last year, and kind of the challenges that Faba bean is kind of the pulse that is different than the other ones, as it's got a high risk for cross-pollination. Then I'll show you CSGA guidelines, and then what the importance of growing practices that'll help preserve these new low Visine, convisine varieties for the future. So, as Meagen had mentioned, the importance of low Visine, convisine is the anemia. And so plant breeders were really moving forward to eliminate any anti-nutritional compounds of Visine and convisine. So therefore, with this gene introduced in the Faba beans, it reduces the Visine and convisine by 99%. And so we're hoping that these varieties kind of launch fava beans to that next food market. It's kind of been sitting in limbo where we have been focusing on the feed market, but then we're kind of only been able to export fava beans in India because it's been a well-established market for the food consumption there. And so if we can now produce fava beans and have it as a high protein product that's better than pulses, it's a better nitrogen fixing crop, it grows on ground that has Aphanomyces in it, it's just kind of an overall great sustainable crop. So into the fun stuff. The chart I have on the left is the percentage of fava beans grown on the pedigreed side. So these are pedigreed acres that I show you. And on the right is last year's seed guide of which varieties has the low Visine convincing gene and which ones do not. This year's crop seed guide, it shows that it doesn't show all the varieties that we have, so, or that are still being grown. So let's go back to the chart on the left. All these red is all snowboard. And so back in 2016, half the acres were FB 9-4 and the other half was snowbird. So see, as you can tell, snowbird is the bottom color red here. It's kind of been not the dominant, but either half or less. In 2019 is when we first saw Fabels into the market. That's this little one here, and Nevi. So these are the two varieties that have been introduced that have the low Visine convisine trait. So that's been 5 years ago. We've since dabbled into DL Novato and DL Desro, and you can see that in 2021, this was the highest acres Saskatchewan has seen for pedigreed fava beans, and it pretty much touched on half of them being low Visine convisine varieties and the other half being snowbird. And I think a little bit of 219-16. So that was also the year that I feel that it was a drought year, so not a lot of yields. So we kind of recovered from 2022, and now in 2023, we are now seeing half the acres still being our pedigreed acres grown as snowbird, and a little bit of 219-16. And then we're seeing a very small percentage, because it's all that we can get is plot production of CDC 1089 and CDC 1142. So we're hoping, and of course Fabel is the other factor. So it would be interesting to see more of the low Visine convisine take over, but I'm just showing you, obviously there's still contracts, either the feed market is still needing some fava bean grown for supply. So if, as we continue on, I would say hopefully 3 to 5 years we can see fava, the non-low Visine convisine varieties fade out, and then have more of these genetic that has the low Visine convisine varieties prevail. So like the Fabels, the 1089, the 1142, those varieties. So one thing that's been interesting, and it was kind of a shell shocked in 2013, is that fava beans is a high risk for pollination. Cross pollination, anywhere from 30 to 80%, is given by any year, and it's through insect pollination. So bees can, on average, they travel 1 kilometer, but if they can travel up to 8 kilometers, but on average, 1 kilometer has been kind of the go-to. Just the way that fava beans present themselves, we're not necessarily worried that wind is a pollinator factor, not like rye or open pollinated rye or hybrid fall rye. it's more the bees that are the pollinators for faba beans, and if wind is very high, they would be the factor that carries the bees as well. So I think this was kind of a new shock for seed growers that yes, we have to kind of treat faba beans more as a rye or more as grass seed as we went forward. So this is currently what last year's guidelines were from CSGA. If you look on the bottom, so here on the right, this is for select plot production. So this is the 2.5 acres fields that we get. It says in the varietal purity that they want isolations, that they want 100 meters isolations from any different variety of faba bean, a non-pedigreed faba bean variety, and then containing off types. So I feel that this is a good start. I was just reading an Australian article here that was launched last year, and they talked about 150 meters being adequate, but in the conclusion of their studies, they said that, you know, they felt that it was very controlled environment, wind, you know, they need multiple years to see if 150 meters is adequate or not, so on and so forth. So they just needed more years of testing. And I've seen these isolation distances change. I think when we first started seed inspections in 2013, I think the isolations for the bigger fields, so the foundation registered and certified fields that get sold to producers, I'm sure it was 3 meters. We then expanded the isolations and, you know, possibly ran into some issues because there was just so many varieties of faba beans that had different characteristics, and there was a lot of IP contracts out there. So we're learning that, and I think a lot of seed growers have learned that CSGA has guidelines. CSGA is very open to industry. They have a protocol for industry to say, hey, like we would like these isolations to be longer, just because of the bee insect pollinators, for especially if we're introducing low vicine, convicine varieties. But I feel because we've started growing, or lots of acres have been put into the ground since 2013, seed growers tend to know that, hey, like we need more than 10 meters from another variety if we're producing foundation registered. In the SAS seed guide, if you read in the variety description page, they talk about doing a 2-kilometer distance between different varieties. And I feel that's pretty good. I've not seen any issues with varieties growing multiple years after when we have that distance. So moving on to like growing practices to maintain these traits, we for sure should start moving on to new varieties. Snowbird's been a tried true, but the varieties that Meagen has shown have, like, obviously are showing better yield potential and early maturity. I think that's why Snowbird has kind of held on for so long. It kind of hit the nail on the head on both yield and maturity. And seeding on new ground, faba beans tend not to re-germinate after, but it's always good practice to have that. Unfortunately, putting bees in the field to increase yields, this is not an option for seed growers, or shouldn't be an option for commercial growers as of yet. If we don't have any of these old varieties kicking around and we just have some of these low vicine, convicine varieties, maybe we can look at that. But I say maybe because if there's certain traits that are prevalent in new varieties and you don't want them to cross with another low vicine, like we can, there's still that outcrossing that happens. So, and then having an isolations distance no different than what the seed guide says of 2 kilometers. So you get to really know what your neighbor's growing. It's good to have great communication on that. testing your seed lot for the seed that you're growing and the harvest sample. This I think is good practice, but I would even take it one step further, is if there's any off types that are seen in the field, probably good to take a field flag it, send those varieties just to show that those are a throwback of that variety, not a variety that has convicine genetics in there. So we're trying to get that out of the system, and yeah, walk the field, see if any types. That's kind of what us as seed inspectors, we provide a report to show what kind of off types we have, or what off types that the variety is showing. There is issue of like throwbacks, so there is an allowance for that, but you know, it's been a great learning curve and they're great fields to walk in. So anyways, if there's any questions later, there's my email, my cell phone if anyone had any other questions, but I'm here for the rest of the day if anyone has any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. If you have any questions for Lynnell, please post them in Teams and we'll address them later in the Q&A discussion that will be at the end. Up next, we have Dr. Bunyamin Turan, a professor at the University of Saskatchewan's Crop Development Centre and Ministry of Agriculture Strategic Research Program Chair in chickpea and flax breeding and genetics. His research is focused on the development of superior chickpea and flax cultivars for Western Canada. Welcome, Bunyamin.
Thank you, Sherilyn. I hope you can hear me well. Good morning, everybody, and I hope everybody is still keeping warm in this cold weather. And I'd like to thank for the SPG for giving me an opportunity to give you an update of what we are doing here at the Crop Development Center. Okay, I'd like to share my PowerPoint. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction from Sherilyn. So I'm a chickpea and flax breeder at the Crop Development Center, but today I will be focusing more onto the chickpeas. Okay, so before we start continuing talking about chickpeas, so I'd like to remind you, everybody here, keep yourself diversified on your what you grow and keep your rotation. So this is an old school. So if you look at the picture on the top there, instead of you have wall-to-wall yellow color, isn't that beautiful when you have blue, you have white, you have purple and brown? So that keep that diversification so that when it's good biologically. Now we are dealing with a lot of new disease as climate change, weather pattern changes. So with the rotation, that will help to reduce that problem, minimize that problem, and also it's good economically. So instead of if you're a producer, you're cursing one commodity because the price dropped, then you have another commodity that may be going up. So keep that in mind. So this is what we recommend to you as a 4-year rotation, if possible, for the areas where you are hit by root rot. So this rotation may need to be extended to 8 years before you going back to the same species of pulses. So keep that in mind, okay? So next one. So where we are now with chickpeas. So if you look at globally, Canada, so chickpeas in Canada, so we produce on average about 200,000 to 250,000 metric tons per year. So in a global scale, that's not very much. That's not a lot. So if you look at on the graph here, I started with Australia. I removed India because if you put India in this graph of the chickpea production, way up the scale. So they produce about 9 to 10 million metric tons per year, but they consume a lot of them. And keep in mind also, India mostly consume the Desi type chickpeas. That's why Australia kind of supplying what they need. But they also produce a small amount of kabuli, and the kabuli from India is exported. So they exported kabuli, and then they buy the Desi, and then they buy field peas from Saskatchewan. So that's where we are now. And then if you look at on that list of countries there, probably we are the country that produce chickpeas in the most kind of the highest hemisphere globally. So we have different kind of environment when we grow chickpeas here. So that will kind of bring the problem that we kind of the challenge, not the problem, challenge that we have, for example, ascocaita pressure, early maturity, so things like that is happening. But when you look at the yield globally, so this is the average 5 years from 2016 to 2021. So we are not bad. So we kind of Mexico, Argentina, and Canada. So we, on average, this is the yield at the farm gate. It's not on our trial. So in the farm gate, we got about, on average, 1.6 ton per hectare. And globally, chickpeas production or yield is about 1 ton per hectare. So that's kind of, we are on the high here, but we need to keep pushing that yield capacity. So we need to improve. On my side, I'm improving the varieties, the yield potential, and also we need to combine that with the management, all the way from site selection, seed treatment, seed choice, variety choice, disease management, weed management. So all that combination that will bring you reaching the yield potential in chickpeas. Okay, so that's where we are. Now, in terms of the breeding, so we kind of divided the goal in the breeding. What is the challenge that is kind of important for the growers, for you, and what is a characteristic that are important for the end consumers? For example, on our side, we look at the yield, and in chickpea especially, seed size is really critical. So kind of 1 millimeter from 7 to 9, for example, millimeter seed size. The price can change the difference up to like 25 cents per pound. That's very significant. And also we will improving the nutritional quality. So this may be helping to keep our product as preferred. Hopefully that will be kind of factored into the price. That will bring kind of return to the farmers. And we reduce the risk and production costs. Ascocaita blight continuing. And then the new disease now, fusarium, early maturity, and then we're also looking into the abiotic stress tolerance, such as frost or freezing, as well as heat tolerance into the newer, in the future varieties. For example, in chickpeas, is sensitive to high temperature when the plants at the flowering stage. So the threshold on average is about 27 degrees Celsius. When the sensitive, when there is temperature reaching 27 degrees Celsius during flowering, a number of flowers will be aborted. So we like to have that resistance to the heat, so that we're maintaining the flower and producing the yield. And also we continue with the ease of management, herbicide tolerance, continuing expanding for different mode of actions. Right now we have tolerance to group 2, but group 2 you have to apply to manage that carefully, because a number of weed tolerance to group 2 herbicide is increasing. So you have to follow the label carefully. You do the tank mix or rotation. Okay, so that's one way. It is one of the tools that is available to you, but you need to approach that diligently. And also continue with the breeding for easy for harvest, upright plant stature. And then we look at what is the end consumer kind of like to have. So that's kind of seed appearance, from size, shape, and color, grain processor, canning, milling efficiency, and nutritional characteristic, protein, oil. For example, in Desi, because they mill Desi into flour, they like to have a low oil content, so that kind of can extend the shelf life of the product from the Desi chickpeas. But for the kabuli, because used for salad or for hummus, they like to have high oil content, high protein, high oil. So we approach that differently. And also continue with alternative new product, for example, green kabuli chickpea, specialty black daisy, for example, for special markets. So we continue on that. So if you are lucky, this is where chickpeas are grown. Okay, so if you are in this blue, dark blue areas, that's where the chickpea currently grows. So this is the data from 2020, but it's not much different from 22 or 23. Okay, so and the red dot here, that's where we have our chickpea trial. So we try to put our trial right in the production area so that we kind of minimize the gap between what we get into the yield to what the producer have in their own yield capacity. So again, if you are up in the northeast of the province, so probably you are not lucky enough to grow chickpea in that area, but you have other options to grow lentil or faba bean, as the previous speaker have talked. Okay, 2023. Okay, this is the varieties that were grown on the prairies. So this is data from Green Commission. We grew about 240,000 acres. So the majority is still Leader and Orion. Okay, this is the older varieties, the large seeded, and we have a problem with Orion because of that kind of a symptom that's still unclear what causing it. But we move on in the breeding, and then the newer lines, newer varieties that Mike talked about is right at the top there. So it's continuing now, expanding. So I would expect in the next few years, Orkney, Pearl, Pasqua, and Lancer will be kind of dominating the acreage here in Saskatchewan or Western Canada. So Mike did a really good job. So probably I just kind of just reiterate a few things here. So from this year, we kind of changed our check cultivars. It used to be B90 or Amit. Now we changed to Lancer. So we kind of increased the bar for the yield. As you see, the numbers changes. Okay, because of the new check that we have is a high yielding one. It's not. So we try to anything that coming from the program to be kind of similar or higher than Lancer. So you can see this is the seed guides. Not everything I put in here, but just the newer one that we have into the seed guide, copy of seed guide here. And the bottom there is the kind of seed size that you can see. So Pasqua is the largest available now. And two specialty chickpeas, Mike already mentioned this as well. See, this is Sunset, Daisy. Again, Daisy is not a big acreage in Canada, but there's kind of still pocket of production of Daisy chickpeas. Again, Daisy chickpeas is used or consumed much different than the kabuli. So mostly the Daisy is the hull and then continue into milling into flour. So this is kind of supplying the local or the ethnic group that use the daisy flour to making the bread, flat bread, or they call it chapati. And Sidisikala is kind of very special. There's a market in Iran that use black daisy for their consumption, as well as this is good for organic growers. Once the hull Sidisikala will have the same cotyledon color as a daisy chickpea. So to segregate, if you will, in the organic production. And this is the data from 2020 to 2023 of the two new lines that will be released this year. Okay, so 2307-15 and 2335-23. And these two lines here, good for Asco Kaita, some 2335-23, a little bit smaller seed size. And these two lines are quite different pedigrees than the Orion or Leader that we had before. So I hope this one will have a little bit minimum problem with the symptom that we see in the field. Again, because we are releasing this year, and I'm filling up the form for registration. So if any of you have an idea, come up with an idea for beautiful names, so send me the name for these two new varieties, because when we register, we have to give the name of these two lines here. So send me by email, and I'll pick up on the best one, and we put it into the registration form, the form 300 to CSGA. And just one step behind, okay, so this is these two lines, and then one step behind this is the 3315-6. So this is, we'll continue to produce the breeder seed for 3315-6. This is a larger seed size, as you can see, and higher yielding than the other two. So the same year that we have, if you look at on the brown and dark brown soil zone, this is kind of 106. So it's good for dark brown soil zone after the 15 site year that we tested in the province. Okay, and then it's on the good side as well for the Ascochyta blight resistance. Okay, and from 2023 regional test, okay, so we include all those lines. So what is exciting in the pipeline is this, the last line here, 3789. So this is a large Kabuli, and yielding quite high in both on area 1 brown and dark brown soil zone. So this is probably a replacement for Pascua, because right now we'll continue in the regional test for a couple more years as we collect more data. As you can see, it's about 10 on average, 10 mil seed size, good for Ascochyta, okay, and then higher yield than Pascua. So we'll continue with this. Okay, so just keep in mind, so this, so the pipeline is quite full for this. And this is how it looked like, the seed size of the 2335-23, 2307-15, 3315-6 that I just talked about, and 3789 on the far right seed size here. So that's the actual seed size from 2023. So it's a bit smaller in general, about 10-15% smaller, but you would expect whenever we get back to normal, you define what normal is, then we may get a larger seed on this. So with that, I'd like to thank our staff who maintaining all the trials in the breeding program, and especially for the breeder seed facility manager, Dave Benalak and Craig Hales. They are the one that kind of make sure that we have, when we release new varieties, make sure that we have enough supply for you, to the growers, and a number of staff here. So collaboration, and also thank you for any of you that allow us to use your land for our trials. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that, Bunyamin. If you have questions, please again post them in Teams and we'll address them later. Next, we have Dr. Tom Warkentin, professor at the University of Saskatchewan's Crop Development Centre and Ministry of Agriculture Strategic Research Program Chair in pulse crop breeding and genetics. His research is focused on the development of superior field pea and soybean cultivars for Western Canada. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Sherry Lynn. Thanks for inviting me. Just gonna find my. Can you see it?
We sure can. That looks great, Tom.
Yes, Tom. It's good.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sherry Lynn and team, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to give a brief update to you today on work we're doing on pea breeding for protein and root rot resistance. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors on this talk at the Crop Development Center, Kishore, Junsheng, Sabina and Bunyamin, who you just heard, and colleagues in Ag Canada in Morden, Ahmed, and in Lethbridge, Shama. Advancing my slide. For some reason, my slide is stuck.
Tom, do you want to stop sharing and then reshare? Just maybe it was glitching a little.
Okay. I think you can see my slide, but it's not in the presentation mode.
It looks like everything's good now, Tom. You've advanced to slide 2 on our
Okay.
end anyway.
Can you see it in a large screen mode?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, away I go then. Sorry for that, folks.
No problem. Well done.
So, here's a summary of the various objectives that we're trying to achieve with pea breeding in the next 5-year period. Like other breeders, we have a list of objectives with high yield at the top of the list, but there's always challenges in order to achieve high yield. And one of those that I want to focus on today is improving the root rot resistance of the varieties to support healthy roots so that we can have good nitrogen fixation so that we can have high yield. And secondly, so that we can have higher seed protein concentration. Of course, in the midst of all that, when we have dry years and heat, we need some kind of resilience for those stresses as well. So speaking of high yielding varieties, here's a quick summary, and many thanks, Meagen, for doing a great job of summarizing these already in your presentation. We have yellow pea varieties across the top of the slide and green pea varieties in the bottom half. These in the bar graph, these are data compiled by the Canadian Grain Commission and obtained from the crop insurance corporations in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. The varieties with CDC at the front of the name are coming from our program at the University of Saskatchewan. The varieties with AAC at the front of the name are coming from Agriculture Canada, bred by my colleague and friend, DJ Bing. So let's start with root rot, and really this is complex, or you could say complicated, not unlike the situation we hear from our cereal friends trying to deal with fusarium head blight, or like our canola friends trying to deal with club root. So it's complicated for various reasons. First off, it's not just one pathogen that we're dealing with. We are dealing with multiple pathogens. Aphanomyces euteiches is the one that gets the most press, but there are also several fusariums, particularly Avicennium and Solani, but there are others as well. So there you go. That's making it complicated to try to address this from a breeding point of view. So what tools are we trying to use to tackle this complicated problem? First off, we're looking at, is there partial resistance within our current cultivars? Secondly, are there known QTLs? QTLs meaning quantitative trait loci, regions in the P chromosomes that might provide partial resistance. And there have been some reported from our colleagues in France, USA, from work that we've done ourselves, both for Aphanomyces and for those two key fusariums. Searching wider, we go to international germplasm sources. First off, we have a panel that we call GWAS-2. GWAS stands for Genome-Wide Association Study, where we have 233 international pea varieties or land races that we're exploring. And there's a new project coming on stream that we'll be partially involved in, where our colleagues are going to evaluate the entire USDA pea collection, 3,000 plus, for Aphanomyces. And so once we've looked at current cultivars and known QTLs and searched various germplasm, potentially we also look at creating new resistances. And how might we do that? One approach, just wave a magic wand. Actually, MAGIC is an acronym that stands for a process where we have multi-parents that are intercrossed, and we try to select good progeny from those. And a recent project, I'll mention it a little bit later on, called P-TIL, where we're using mutation breeding. It's not GMO technique, it's a sort of a standard plant breeding approach to try to create new mutants that might give better resistance. I'm putting in brackets, we're not doing gene editing at this point. We can talk about that at some other stage, but it's not really a process that we're thinking to use at this moment. So overall, the key strategy is to breed new varieties with improved root rot resistance, combined with all the other desired features that growers are looking for: standability, yield, protein, and so on. And we certainly know the situation is quite urgent for pea and lentil. A quick update here from a little project we did under the Pulse Cluster, which is a newly supported project that we're involved in from this past year with colleagues in Lethbridge, that's Shama Chatterton, and in Morden, Ahmed Abdelmagid, and as well as our disease nursery here in Saskatoon. We tested the CDC varieties. So it's kind of a look and see approach, and put them into these 3 disease nurseries and look at what happens. And what we found was that the Lethbridge nursery up here had quite high disease. Our nursery in Saskatoon was kind of intermediate, and the Morden one was a bit lower, but even the Morden one still had substantial disease. I want to point out these varieties here with these long names over on this left-hand side of the graph. Those are ones that arose from our molecular breeding efforts, at least our first round of molecular breeding efforts in collaboration with Sabina Benitza, Kishore Gali. So these ones had lower scores than some of my other varieties and some of the Czech varieties. They all obviously didn't have 0 scores. They still had disease, but it's somewhat promising, I think. And when we conduct the statistics, we see that the varieties do differ and the locations differ. One thing a little bit sobering but realistic, I think, is that when we look into these 3 nurseries, we definitely find Aphanomyces in all 3, but we also find Fusarium avinaceum, Fusarium redolens, Fusarium solani, and a couple of others. So it becomes a kind of a complex mixture. So the scoring we do here is simply for root rot, because it gets difficult to separate the symptoms of each of those. And just to put in perspective, so far, our molecular breeding efforts that gave rise to these few lines here, this work was really based on Aphanomyces. So far, not based on Fusarium, but that will be coming. Here's a picture of what our disease nursery looks like. We have drip irrigation to make it nice and wet, because Aphanomyces is favored by wet conditions. You see that the disease pressure has been increasing over the years since we started the nursery, so we feel we have quite a good nursery now. Here's an overhead shot. It's about 1 acre. We only use a portion of it in any given year, and this is what the plots looked like in 2023 on June 16th, thanks to Steve and his team. So I mentioned this GWAS panel, and it's become a very nice resource for us. We're using it to try to address protein challenges and root rot, as well as agronomic and water use efficiency. So as mentioned, is over 200 accessions from 21 global breeding programs, many lines from USDA collection that you could call them land races. As well as a key point here, we included our recent varieties and those from DJ Bing's program in Ag Canada, as well as a non-nodulating mutant and some wild pea accessions. So we tested that GWAS panel, these 233 lines, in an indoor test based on 10-day-old seedlings, inoculated with one specific strain of Aphanomyces that we call AE11. This is thanks to Sabina's group. And then so we inoculated them and rated them for disease 10 days later. And here's what we found. So out of the 233, most of them had 50, 60, 70% disease. So a bit sobering, but it's a function of how much disease pressure there was. None of them had in this 0 range. But one thing I found rather interesting was that when I looked at those commercial lines out of the 233, they were kind of dispersed across all of these different categories. And interestingly, here's CDC Meadow, the most widely grown variety, and it's in the category with the most disease. So maybe it's a bit of a encouragement for you to look at a variety other than Meadow, even though it has many other good features. But you might start to consider some of the varieties over on this side of the scale for potentially better resistance. And I want to say it with a grain of salt. Remember, it was an indoor test on seedlings. Only one strain was used. Nevertheless, it gives us some clue. And what I'd like to do, and I think what we're going to do in the coming years, is to test all of these named varieties in those 3 disease nurseries. So we also have, backup field data that we can use to perhaps improve the rating system that we provide in the provincial seed guides. We did a similar analysis of these same 233 varieties. You can see them there in fine print. Of course, you can't read them, but trust me, these are the 233 varieties tested for Fusarium avinaceum. Again, it's an indoor test. Whoops, I'll go back a step with one accession or one isolate of Fusarium avinaceum. And we got ratings all the way from around 0 to nearly 100. So a real diversity. But so in a way, that's very promising, except for the fact that almost all of these that are in this low score range are ones with purple flowers. So in P, you have purple flower types like maple or dun types. But most of our production, 98% of production in the Canadian prairies is white flower types. So we're searching for something here in this middle range that has white flowers with at least some moderate resistance. So that's certainly under exploration, and it's a big part of Stephen Awadeli's PhD research. And Stephen is a wonderful student, really tackling this Fusarium avinaceum. I mentioned the magic word, P magic, and this is a recent project. It's being led by Marcus Samuel at University of Calgary and Satish Kagali at National Research Council in Saskatoon, funded by Genome Canada, Genome Alberta, and several other organizations. Many thanks to all of them. One component that our group is looking at is to use this magic population that it consists of 8 varieties that were crossed in all combinations. So 2 of them are varieties, Lawachko and Spectrum, that you might have heard of. 4 are high protein lines, and 2 are lines with good root rot resistance. So they're crossed in all combinations, and we're going to evaluate them genetically and phenotypically, and hopefully pick some winners out of that. And in terms of this mutagenesis approach, we're using the variety CDC Tollefson, which we know is a high-yielding, promising variety for Saskatchewan. We used fast neutron bombardment conducted at University of California in Davis to create mutations, and we're going to look at those through a pipeline over the next several years, again, to try to find some winners with respect to root rot or protein. So take-home message, root rot is damaging, resistance is complicated. We're trying to squeeze out every bit of resistance we can from any sources we can, be it cultivars, germplasm in the crosses we make, or perhaps mutants that we might generate. Briefly on protein, seed protein content, there's a fractionation industry that's been growing over the last decade, quite exciting here in Canada, US, and internationally. Here's the little graph I showed you before with the most widely grown varieties of yellow pea. I've arranged them in this dimension here on this little table just to show you the protein concentration. So CDC Amarillo is at 23% on a dry matter basis. Something like Meadow would be 22.5, so it's 0.5% lower. But notice the ones in green, Spectrum, Lawachko, Canary, Prophet, and Golden, they are varieties that have more protein than Amarillo. So I think you'll see that the trend amongst newer varieties is going to be in the upward direction with respect to protein, and I think that's promising. And kind of how I look at it is, don't we really want high protein yield? What do I mean by protein yield? I'll give an example. Here's 2 varieties, Spectrum and Lacombe. They're the Czechs. Here was the yield over 18 environments, 18 experiments over the last 2 years in the co-op test. These are 2 candidate varieties that I might bring to the registration meetings in a month. They have slightly higher yield, Their protein is intermediate between the two checks. When you multiply yield by protein yield per hectare, and you have a boost here, a bump in the right direction. So anyway, so that you're producing more protein on a given piece of land. Briefly, some mapping populations that we're evaluating. These are populations with quite a lot of, like, over 100 entries. This GWAS, as I said, is over 200. When we test them in the field, we see a range from the low 20s to the mid 20s, or mid 20s even into the 30s. So I think there's promising material coming. Graduate student Jun Sheng, he's nearly ready to defend, has already published 2 papers. In this first one, he shows 3 different areas in the pea genome. These little cartoons you could imagine are chromosomes of pea. So 3 different areas that are related to higher protein. We've already developed markers associated with those areas, so we're using those in breeding. And here, these 4 areas are related to the protein quality, actually the methionine cysteine concentration. So we're developing some tools that can help us. In this GWAS population, we do an analysis of the protein concentration over 3 different locations. And at the same time, we have the genotype information. So any little dots at the very tops of these panels are the places on the chromosomes of P that could be the most promising for protein. And again, our goal would be to convert those into useful markers. PNAM is a project that stands for Nested Association Mapping. Many thanks to SAS Pulse Growers and the ministry for supporting this project. Basically, we've crossed CDC Lawachko with several known elite varieties. We've crossed it with Limerick, which is high protein, and 7 other high protein lines. So all of the progeny of these 15 crosses are in the field this summer, and it's going to help us to fine-tune our markers for protein. So overall, it becomes a shopping list of important things that we'd like to achieve in breeding of pea, and probably a similar list for chickpea, faba bean, or lentil. So as breeders, we try to address as many as we can as quickly as we can. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up and thank many wonderful colleagues that I have the opportunity to work with, and many wonderful funding organizations that have been supporting us over the years. So Sherry Lynn, I stop with that.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I hope there are questions that start coming in. Please use the Teams chat box so that we can have some questions coming in and get ready for our Q&A time frame that will be at the end of this session. So thanks again, Tom, for your presentation.
Welcome.
Our next presentation is about Limagrain's new pulse breeding strategy for peas and lentils. This is brought to you by Benzon Lorenzana, Limagrain's head of cereals and pulse research in North America, and Jaenet Schure, pulse breeder in Saskatchewan with Limagrain cereal seeds. Welcome, Benzon and Jaenet.
Thanks, Sherry Lynn, for the introduction. I will share the presentation. So here we go. Can everybody see the screen correctly?
Yes, that looks great, Janet.
Perfect. All right, so thank you so much, SPG, for letting us present ourselves. And let's move on to introductions.
So I'm Benzon Lorenzana. Like Sherry Lynn said, I'm the head of cereals and pulses research for Limagrain in North America. Pleased to be here today to give you an update on the breeding strategy for peas and lentils. Janet.
Yes, and I'm Janet. Schure. I'm the pulse breeder for Limagrain cereal seeds. I'm originally Dutch, so it's okay if people can't pronounce it. Yeah. Next slide.
All right, before we talk breeding, I would like to share with you some details about Limagrain. So Limagrain is an agricultural co-op and an international seed company that is focused solely on genetic improvement of crops, and we deliver these through the seeds that we sell. Being owned by farmers, the focus of the company is long-term sustainable progress and growth. Limagrain is the #4 seed company worldwide, behind only the big agrochemical giants Bayer, Corteva, and Syngenta. Now, Janet and I are with a unit called LCS, is Limagrain Cereal Seeds. It's the North American entity for Limagrain, Limagrain Field Seeds actually, that covers the pulse breeding program. So as you can see in the slide, field seeds is the biggest activity within Limagrain, accounting for 39% of the about $2.1 billion turnover of Limagrain in fiscal year 22. All right, next slide, Janet.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in this slide, you can see that the pulse breeding program in Limagrain is actually jointly funded by both Limagrain and Saskatchewan pulse growers. Now, the Limagrain Canadian entity called Limagrain Cereals Research Canada is hosting the pulse breeding program in Saskatoon and provides research services such as field trialing, pathology, and greenhouse operations. Limagrain provides global germplasm resources and expertise. The breeding programs in Europe and Australia are contributing germplasm to the Canadian pulse breeding program. Now, the Limagrain Field Seeds research also is contributing breeding support teams, which are based in Europe, mainly in France. That includes, analytics teams and applied genomics and molecular marker teams, helping us in this breeding effort in Canada.
All right. Thank you, Benzon, for the introductions. I'd like to talk a little bit about our breeding objectives. We've been working on those the last year to really, define objective for the farmers, what they're looking for. The first ones I'd like to briefly touch are the ones for lentils. And as you can see directly, we really want to look into an alternative herbicide tolerant systems for lentils. Currently, there's only Clearfield on the market, and we are looking into new options, and we've got some promising things in the pipeline. So that's why you can see underneath here a green for germplasm and a green for phenotyping, because we figured those two things already out. Of course, yield is very important for farmers. So that's something we'll keep on focusing on. We already got some strong germplasm for our yield, so that's very nice. And underneath here, you can see the root rots, the Aphanomyces and Fusarium that already were previously mentioned in previous presentations, and we've got Escoquida blight. We're developing methods to be able to phenotype these and look into our germplasm if there's something we can use, of course. But we'll have to prioritize. So for now, it's 100% the herbicide tolerance. And then for peas, of course, there's yield, #1. Then, of course, the Aphanomyces fusarium, the root rots, which are decreasing yields tremendously in Canada right now. But of course, there's other traits as well, like lodging, and of course, all the quality traits, like seed coat breakage, like bleaching. Of course, there's protein, but like we have to prioritize where we're focusing on. So these are the ones for now. And something really nice to mention about the agronomists is that we tested that protocol and developed it, and you can see our results here for lentils and peas. So that's why our phenotyping is yellow. We do want to scale it up a bit more. And then I'll bring it back to Benzon.
So one of our main initiatives is to optimize breeding strategy and increase the rate of genetic gain for yield and key traits in peas and lentils. So the key traits that Jaenet just covered. We aim to do this by increasing the accuracy of selection and the speed of breeding. We plan to accelerate the breeding and product development cycle significantly by leveraging the significant analytics and applied genomics capabilities of Limagrain and fully utilizing our capacities in in running multiple generations per year in greenhouses, combined with genomic selection and predictive breeding. So you can see in this slide, our initial plans for breeding peas and lentils took us about 8 to 9 years before we generate a variety that can be supported for registration. Upon evaluation, we think we could reduce the initial process, the development of lines, as well as the very, very early testing. We could shave those off and reduce those by about 2 to 3 years. So it would take us on about 6 years to develop lines that could be supported for registration in the seventh year. Again, this is dependent on us being able to implement marker-assisted selection and genomic selection, as well as predictive breeding and multiple generations per year in the greenhouse, both of which are really supported. We have large teams within Limagrain that can support us in all of these efforts. Jaenet?
Yes. So the second major initiative is that we really want to focus on genomics. What we want to achieve is that we want to be able to predict our crosses and the outcomes before we even tested it in the fields. So with the use of genomic selection, you can already test your lines and know, okay, this line is less promising than the other. So let's move forward with the higher yielder in our fields, which is an amazing technology, and you can apply it for all kinds of traits like protein that are less easy to track and consist of multiple genes. We already developed a platform to enable it to do those selections, and one of them is the P genotyping chip. That one is developed. The only thing we'll need to do now is input phenotypic data to be able to do those genomic predictions. And then the next thing we really want to develop is the lentil chip, which is a tool for those predictions in the field. And we got a lot of help from our colleagues in France. They're located here, as you can see on the map. So it's a great collaboration. And then the third major initiative we did was our trial network. We wanted to update that a little bit more. Last year, we only had 5 lentil locations in Saskatchewan and 6 locations for peas, and we really wanted to expand that network, be more aligned with the registration trials, but also be more aligned with where farmers are actually growing peas and lentils. So we made a little bit of shifts in this. And of course, it's very important because the registration trial, we want to have products that can pass registration, of course, and we want to have product that will, help farmers as well. So that's where we ended up with this new trial network. And then the last initiative we did this year is developing a protocol for vaccomyces testing and actually test some new germplasm coming in from France. And you can see here Antenna working on scoring. This happened right in December. And you can indeed see here that it worked for lentils and peas as well. And we really want to enable this to have a higher throughput of lentil and pea lines to really screen as much material as possible in the fastest time as possible. And then a little bit of where our breeding program is heading. I thought it'd be nice to share a little bit on our yield increases for peas and for lentils. So this is the first one, and as you can see in this graph, we compared it to CDC Amarillo, and the first one is the first little box plot is the co-op registration lines, and then you can see our selections from our third year yield entries and second year yield entries. And first one, overall, you can see an increase. You can see a little dip in year 2, but that's quite natural. And one of our plans to overcome this lower yields is by accelerating some lines from year 1 all the way already to year 3 and promote them faster to really overcome this. Then for lentils, it looks a little more dramatic. As you can see here, we have a couple of years, year 4 and year 1, that seem to have a little dip, but those are all repeats from our program. We had a little gap in our program for year 1, so we just repeated our material and gave them an extra look to be really sure, is this something we want to move forward with or not? And as you can see, our selections were really good last year because they're having a nice improvement in yields. And then for co-op year 3 and year 2, you can see that nice increase that we are improving our yields, and of course we'll fill up this gap again with new material coming in. And of course, same thing happens here if we want to accelerate some lines because they look promising after our first year in yield trials. We'll do that to really overcome these gaps. And next year, you won't even see a year 4 in our slide because that's something usually you won't do. But because it was our first year, we really wanted to give everything an extra thorough look to really be sure we wouldn't throw anything out that could be potentially very useful for us. And then I would like to end my presentation by thanking our teams that are working very hard on it every day. This is the LCRC team, and we've got indeed, like Benzon mentioned, a field team, which is led by Tim van Steenbergen, then the pathologist Antenna Faisa, and our greenhouse team, which is led by Juan Lobo. And yeah, for all, we're very excited about the whole collaboration, and we'll continue our breeding efforts. And then I'll give it back to Benzon.
Yes, and lastly, again, just highlighting that we have the large teams of analytics, applied genomics, and other breeding technologies teams and capabilities within Limagrain that are supporting us in this in our breeding efforts. We are also bringing in genomic resources from breeding programs in Europe, specifically in France, as well as from Australia. Actually, we've started receiving some of those germplasm as well. With this, we are confident that we have all the germplasm, the tools, the know-how, and most importantly, the people to develop and deliver the best peas and lentils genetics for Saskatchewan and broader Western Canadian growers. So with this, we thank you all. We'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jaenet and Benzon. Using chips and genomics is exciting, and I look forward to new varieties in the future. We're now going to move into some live Q&A with our presenter panel. We are having some glitches with our Q&A system, so if you have questions, please email them to communications@saspulse.com. We understand some of you, for some reason, are being blocked with the Q&A, so please send them directly by email. For our panel, please turn on your cameras, and for attendees, it isn't too late. Please submit those questions. If you can post in Teams, that's great. If not, please send them via email, and that's again to communications@saspulse.com. As we wait for questions, I would like to thank everyone once again for the great talks on variety of pulses. I look forward to where we're going and what the opportunities are that are going to come out in the next few years, as well as 5 and 10 years down the road. I think it's an exciting time for pulses, and varieties is a huge part of it. So really excited on that front. So we had, in terms of questions, I'm going to start with one question, and this is going to go to Mike and Meagen. I'm wondering if the regional variety trials favor the conventional lines because they are done weed-free. It is difficult to compare a new conventional line to an older herbicide-tolerant line and draw conclusions about yield drag. Who would like to answer that one?
I'll take a stab at it because I assume it's, yeah, probably leaning towards the conventional lentils, which is fair enough. Yeah. So I guess the RVTs are weed-free plots, so they're you're going to get better control. Well, you're going to get unbiased yields from your plots in the RVTs, so you're going to be clean. When you move into the fields, that's where you're going to see, if you have a weedier field, you're going to get that benefit from those clear field tolerant lines, if it's weeds that can be controlled through clear field products. As far as, I guess, the drag side of things, so I'm going to scare people away from using clear field tolerant lentils, but historically, so our first variety that came out was CDC Impact in 2006. So you look at the yield of Impact against like Redberry for the check at the time, it was 84% of Redberry. Redberry was a conventional. Maxim was yielding 104% against Redberry. So, a lot of these new clearfield varieties that are coming out you're not seeing that big yield drag anymore. And even just, I touched back on that slide I had on the RVTs, on the small reds and large reds, where Monarchs are new clearfield large red, and it was out yielding Red Moon conventionally in both the north and the south there. So I guess exciting that we're going to have some potential for high yielding clearfield varieties, but then we also have the potential for those high yielding conventional varieties coming out too. So I don't know if that answered the question.
I think that addressed that. Thank you, Mike. I think that addressed the question. I have now a question on faba beans. And this could be either Meagen or Lynnell. Is the Visine in Snowbird present at all times, or is it elevated when you have lots of plant stress?
Lynnell, do you know the answer to that one? Because I don't want to. Yeah, do you want to?
Sherilyn, can you repeat the second part of that question?
So the question is the Visine in Snowbird present at all times, or is it elevated when you have a lot of plant stress?
I feel like because Visine is a gene in the genetics, right? So it's in the variety no matter what. Is that what you're going to say, Meagen?
Yeah, that's where I was leaning towards it too, in conversations with one of our faba bean breeders that we work with, talking about faba bean traits like flower color and tannin and that association. My understanding is that Visine is similar. It's part of the genetic makeup of that plant. And so introducing that gene or triggering the gene that reduces the Visine content, it isn't a stress response. It's always present, just like flower color. But I'm not a breeder, so I don't want to go and say that definitively.
Okay, thank you. Question to Tom about Aphanomyces and could be Jaenet and Benzon as well. Has there been any positive Aphanomyces updates from France? As I know they have been struggling with it longer than we have. We have some strong breeding plans and variety research, but what has already been working in their country? So in other words, what is working in France or not?
Yeah, I think there has been at least one variety release. Maybe Limagrain colleagues could jump in, but I think we heard at the Root Rot workshop recently that there is a variety release in France. I don't know if it's very huge acres or not. It will have some improved resistance. I don't know if there's more than one though. So yes, they're making some incremental progress. And you know, we would try to build on that under our conditions.
Benzon or Jaenet, do you have any further comments to that?
Yeah, for as far as I understand in France is that they're mainly working with partial resistance. There hasn't been like, you know, one silver bullet yet, even in France. So, but very excited indeed to hear that they released a variety. That's very good progress.
And Janet, we can share that we got a hold of the set of lines from France that currently in our screening process and going to be integrated into our pipeline.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And I think along the same lines, and Tom, I'm putting you a bit on the spot because it's lentils and not peas, but how long do we anticipate until Aphanomyces lentil variety might be coming available? Looking to anyone who would like to speak to that, and maybe Jaenet and Benson would also like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think what I can say from our side, probably Sabina and Kirsten are the people to talk to on that one. What I understand is that in Sabina's surveys of lentil germplasm, didn't find much exciting within the cultivated lentil, but found something quite positive in a wild relative of lentil, not too distant. It's a relative that is crossable. So it sounds promising, but you know, still a little ways out there, and that's I think what they're going to focus on a lot in the next 3 to 5 years.
If I may add, Sherilyn, once a source is identified, we do have the platform to rapidly introduce the gene into our germplasm. The only thing is like Tom already talked about, that source still needs to be identified or developed. So that's really the challenge at this point.
Well, thank you. Hopefully it happens quickly and we'll have lentils once we kind of get to that stage that have some Aphanomyces, because we need it just as bad with lentils as we do with peas, as we all know. So thank you, guys. Another lentil question, and this is relating to the differences between some seed coat colors in the large greens and the large reds. Is there concern at all in the market with off-spec large green lentils being mixed with large reds, and how is that being handled?
I don't know. I guess I won't try and pin an answer on that, because really, yeah, I don't know. I mean, originally it was, yeah, the KR2s were the only ones. Sublimes had the off-colored seed coat, and you didn't want the admixture in the large greens. Now we're kind of flipping that, right? Off-color large greens into the large reds. I don't know, Sherilyn, do you have anything on that?
Well, my understanding, and Lori knows this stuff off the top of her head, so unfortunately she's not here today, but they've added a grading component with lentils that they actually have to look at the seed coat or the cotyledon color in order to grade them. And so that will identify what class they fit in and should hopefully keep different classes separate. So that's a big difference is if you're unsure or when it comes to grading, period, they have to look at the cotyledon color, and that will distinguish what class that goes into. Bunyamin, you got off easy so far. So this question is related to chickpeas and seed size.
I thought I'm free.
Never. What yield penalty can be tolerated and still be profitable if you're going towards the large kabuli? So in other words, is it more profitable to focus on lower yielding varieties with large seed size, or just targeting yield and going for that larger yield? We know some growers are sizing the seed at the end, so then, you know, selling the larger stuff for the premium and selling the others at a discount. So have you done the economics on that, and what sort of works?
Well, what we have right now, for example, if you look at Pascua, we have yield penalty but this is not the goal. The goal is not to have lower yield and larger seed size. Like, we have to push into the larger seed and maintaining the yield. So for example, the new line that we have, as I mentioned, replacement for Pascua in the next few years, if still maintaining the yield capacity, so that will push the yield higher. So that's the goal. So lower yielding, larger seed size is not the goal, certainly. That's only temporarily where we don't have this, the lines are available. But having said that, seems to be growers do not mind that. At that time, I was a little bit surprised. I was kind of a bit wary when I released Pascua. Should I go? Should I not? Then I consulted with growers, actually, with seed growers. Do you think they will go to the market? I said, well, yes, put it on, because the difference in pricing in chickpea is huge. So like a 2 mil difference in seed size can translate into 15 to 20 cents per pound, and you multiply that by pound per acre, so which is we get 1,800, 16 to 1,800. That's huge. So they're willing to have that, as long as the other factors such as disease and others are similar. So they're willing that. But again, that's not the goal, Sarah. So the goal is to push both yield and seed size, and I think we will be able to reach that. It's not dramatic, but we will getting toward into that.
Well, that's good to hear. And I guess my flip question to that would be is, what do we need to do to have opportunity for higher value on those smaller seeded chickpeas that we can grow and have them good quality? What is sort of limiting the market on that?
For the smaller size, higher quality. So for that one, for example, CDC Pearl. Pearl is smaller seed size, and one group actually developing really good marketing, and it happened to be the canning industry in Europe really like that variety. So this is kind of we need to go into that. So it has a higher protein content at some point, these varieties, and the seed size really depend on what industry, kind of what the target end consumer, whether we targeting for canning industry or direct use, for example, like a large seeded kabuli or daisy. So for us here as a breeder, we don't want to miss any opportunity. We try to address everything. So if we can get smaller yield, smaller seed size, but higher yield, that will compensate. And if we can have that additional nutritional value into that, and we hope that will kind of come up into as a one of the component into the pricing, that will be great as well. We'll like to fill. We don't want to miss any opportunities, Erwin. That's
exactly.
The bottom line. Yeah.
Chickpeas are a solution for our Phanomyces issue. So, you know, are one of the solutions. So we would like to see where we can help growers have more market access and keep that value up as well. So
yeah.
Moving to a different question, and I'm going to pose this one towards Meagen. It's about the comparing new varieties and looking at the data sets. Just wondering about the accuracy of comparing new varieties with only 1 or 2 years of data with well-established lines with multiple years of data. What's your thoughts and comments on that?
Yeah, so there are challenges, of course, when it comes to bringing new varieties on and limited years of data. And Tom and the other breeders in the room will be able to speak to that process of how long it takes a variety to hit market, to get into growers' hands from the time of release. So it is a lengthy process. It takes a long time for varieties to emerge. The varieties we presented today have 4 and 5 years of data across multiple sites. So when I presented the regional variety trial data, Tom, do you want to speak? You can speak to this better, maybe. You're muted.
No, go ahead, Meagen. I'll make a comment when you're done.
Sure. Okay.
I'm just keen about the topic.
Yeah, of course. So the varieties I presented on today, other than CDC citrine, which was released in 2022, which was a year and a half ago now. The other varieties, we're looking at 2019 and 2021 for release. We're looking at 3 years now since they've been released. We have co-op data as well that we look at, but the regional variety trials, that data is across multiple sites. So I think I'd have to go back on the slide deck, but one of the newer varieties has 83 site years of data. That was what we presented here today. So the more data you have, the more accurate that those yield representations will be. And so there are maybe some challenges, or take it with a grain of salt when you see those comparisons. But when we have regional variety trial sites across the province, and Sherilyn, you can speak to the number that we have because I don't know them off the top of my head, on an average year, we're testing them across multiple geographies, across multiple years. So in the one variety we saw, I think it was CDC Tolleson, we saw from 2022 to 2023 a switch in protein content, and that could be environmental response from 1 year to the next. So we will see shifts like that as far as the specs on some of these varieties can shift when we're looking at the data right after release. But over the next year and another year, lots of those big fluctuations in data or in the specs on those varieties will level out as we get more data into those systems to run those statistics. And so those individual years will kind of smooth away. When we have varieties like CDC Husky that consistently yield the highest year in and year out over 3 or 4 years, and we've had pretty variable weather conditions across the province, we have good confidence in the fact that that's a good, well-adapted variety and can handle multiple environments and geographies province-wide. Tom, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thanks, Meagen. I don't really have anything much to add other than if people look in this varieties of grain crops pamphlet, one of the first columns on every crop type is the years of testing. So I would encourage growers, agronomists to look in that years of testing. The bigger the number means the data set is larger, and probably the numbers are that much more reliable than a variety that would have a lesser number of years of testing. And that's basically what Meagen said.
I think to add to that too is that for pulses, we're moving to the regional variety trials where the varieties going in have to be in for 5 years so that we have more consistent 5 years of data for all the varieties. Just gives more data, more direct comparisons, and better data set in the end. So you'll see that as we get now moving to those 5 years in the future, there'll be more site years for each of the varieties. Switching gears again here. Pea protein. So back to you, Tom. Is there any discussion that growers will get premiums on higher protein varieties? If not, then why would a grower go for higher protein versus higher yield? And I think you covered that a little bit in terms of, protein per acre, but at the moment, growers aren't getting paid for that. So I guess, have you heard anything different in that space?
Yeah, very fair question. And I asked that question to a couple of the protein fractionation companies. I think their answer is a little bit cautious, you could say. I think in theory, yes, they want to, or they would give premiums. In theory, they would prefer to buy varieties that have higher protein, or perhaps not buy seed of varieties that have lower protein. but I encourage SPG and the growers to push those companies to pay up. Why not?
Thank you. Another question coming in is, how does ingredient functionality fit into variety selection? Is the breeding teams working with value-added ingredient industry to see how the seeds work in food and feed production? I'll maybe put that to Jaenet and Benzon first, see if there's... Are you guys working closely with
Do you want to start, Benson, or?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we work as so from our end, we work really closely with our commercial product manager. So it will be through this role that those kind of inputs gets to our breeding team. Jaenet?
Yes. Like currently, the only thing we're looking at is proteins. But if there's indeed anything else we need to look into for our selections, we can definitely work on that. Currently, we're using NIR for protein, but there's a lot of other different traits you can measure, like different types of protein even. So there's a lot of things possible. And if there's an ask, we can work on that.
Thank you. Tom? Would you like to comment on that?
Sure,
On the
sure, I
work that
could.
you're doing?
Yeah, I myself, probably Bunyamin as well, we work quite closely with our colleagues in food science. So there's Mike Nickerson, so we work with them a lot on the quality aspects of the seeds, of the varieties. How can we improve the profiles? How can we, in terms of functionality, Mike works on things like solubility or emulsifying properties or amino acid profiles and all those kinds of things. So those two are probably a little bit closer directly to the food industry than I am, but you know, we also, me and Bunyamin also would have interactions with companies like Roquette or with AGT and so on. So yes, it's in our list. You know, first in terms of P, I'm keen about higher protein content, but after that, then it goes to the traits of amino acids and other functionality traits. So yep, it's important.
And I'd like to kind of put a plug in right now on this topic because we do have a pulse quality program, and Tom, you sit on the steering committee with that. That was established in 2022, where all the varieties that are tested through the regional variety trials are being analyzed for quality traits. And so that seed composition, as well as the next phase, is going to get into some of that functionality. We're just at the stage where the first set of data coming out will be released publicly. And so that sort of information, we're looking at, you know, the variety characteristics, how the site and locations and environment interact with it, and ultimately how best management practices influence seed quality in the pulse industry. So it's a big program, and we're working with the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center in Saskatoon, who's doing all the quality analysis. So look for that report coming soon, and it's some exciting results coming out of that. So that kind of feeds into that question as well. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Perfect.
Am I allowed to ask a question? I'm going to ask a lentil question. So I saw the data about CDC Monarch having this super high yield. So will everyone soon grow CDC Monarch? I mean, why would you grow anything else?
I actually had this conversation with Sherry Lynn yesterday. So yeah, I don't know, because, well, Sherry Lynn, we had talked about how it'll be dependent on the buyers, right? Like on whether they're interested in buying the large red lentils and determining the marketability of a large red versus a small red. Like I know the big big draw for a large red lentil is decortication, but then you've got that plump football lentil on the market. So whereas like small reds are really good for getting into a split lentil category. So I don't know, Sherry Lynn, do you want to?
The big thing is, yeah, from a yield, it looks very advantageous, but it comes down to the marketability, right? Because it is a large seeded red lentil, which is a different sort of market than the small red lentils traditionally. So some can kind of interchange a bit, but it's not going to replace small red lentils by any means. So the marketing definitely comes into play. And I honestly don't know what the price differential it would be right now either. So that would also come into play when considering kind of going back to the protein thing, right? Is it yield or that price differential, right? So that's where that is at. I did have also a comment come in regarding the question on the large reds versus the large greens. And we have a large red that has a green seed coat. And whenever we're having those sort of off types, they are released in a closed loop system so that the separation can be maintained. So they're not entering into the general bulk commodity market, but released in a closed loop so that it helps to keep the different varieties separate or different types separate. So just wanted to make sure that that comment was there. I think that pretty much wraps it. Oh, there was one more question. Sorry, I'm getting through. I've got emails and I've got Q&A and I've got lots of different places things are coming in. There was a question about, and I think this is kind of coming a bit from our AGM. And will there be a future pulse breeding and partnership with the CDC, given its past experience? And I think, we're very confident that we will be reaching agreements here soon. We have a term sheet that we're working on. We've already committed to funding to Tom and Bunyamin's Chickpea and Pea program through the Pulse Science Cluster and stuff. So yes, it's exciting, and we're looking forward to moving forward with the CDC. And they also have a new lentil breeder there too, which is really exciting. So all positive on that note. So with that, if there's any questions that come in after the fact, we will address them through the email that we will be sending out, and the answers then will get to all the attendees. A recording of this event will be posted on SPG's website, and everyone in attendance will receive an email on how to access it. You'll also receive an email with a link to a survey, so please share your feedback so that we can improve upon this event. Your opinion is valuable. It helps us to deliver valuable extension opportunities and to continuously improve. I'd like to thank all of our presenters and our attendees for not only their participation in the question and answer and asking the questions, and the presenters also for the valuable information that they provided. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that registration is now open for our SPG Winter Pulse meetings. We will be making stops in Swift Current, North Battleford, Weyburn, and Humboldt throughout January and February, with the first one starting next week already. Check our website at saspulse.com for more information, and thank you to everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.